Okay, so what we have for tonight is Iliad 7 and 8, two of the less read books, to be sure. Iliad 7 being really about the gods and the humans. The human characters are not that don't figure very high, very much in book 7 and 8. It's Apollo, Athena, and Zeus, and to some extent Hera. And the gods are debating about the battle as the book begins. And in the middle of this debate, Hector issues a challenge to the Greek army and says, "Bring forth your greatest warrior." And so Nestor then is charged with figuring out who's going to match, uh, have a one-on-one battle with Hector. And they choose by lot. They sort of each put a token or some fragment of a piece of pottery into a helmet, shake it up, and see whose helmet pops out, whose token pops out. And turns out it's Ajax. And his reaction, which begins in line 161 of book 7, is really extraordinary. He says that he's more than happy that this has happened. I mean, he's not going to shy away from them by any means. He's not going to shy away from the fight. In fact, he says, "Let's pray, but let's pray quietly that I succeed." And then changes his mind a minute later. He says, "Wait a minute, no, we have nothing to hide. Let's pray openly. Let's shout the prayer to the Trojans." So he wants to sort of rile everyone up, and this is leadership on the battlefield. Not only fighting from the front, but also being sort of like almost enthused about self-sacrifice. And it does motivate, undoubtedly, the army, but they're all going to hang back and watch the result. So in line 233, and it's a very brief part of the book, the two warriors fight, and it's um, it's interesting that the way they address one another is similar in a way to Glaucus and Diomedes in book 6. They, the idea is that they're gonna have a fair fight. Um, you know, um, Ajax says, I'm not interested in fighting with you from sort of behind some barricade or something. It's going to be out in the open and toe to toe, um, and so they go at it, and nothing really happens. It's a draw, and night comes, and Hector says it's best to respect the fall of night. It won't be a fair fight if we do this in the dark because random things can happen. One remembers there's a famous much later Hellenistic epic called the Argonautica by Apollonius of Rhodes. And there's a long, long battle description in this epic, which is meant to be actually humorous. It's very dark humor, but the battle takes place at night and people are just sort of making all sorts of mistakes and, killing their friends and missing entirely and falling off of cliffs and what have you because they can't see anything. So when Ajax and Hector decide to call it a draw, they exchange gifts, much like in the way that Glaucus and Diomedes did. And Hector says, "Let it be known that we are friends. The two of us are friends," which is a striking thing. Hector, as we've seen in the first 6 books, is really interested in protecting the city, protecting his family at all costs. And here he is reaching out to not only one of the Greeks, but the most savage, perhaps, of the Greeks. Or I guess Diomedes gets that label as long as he's healthy and that he gets wounded. But Ajax is the principal. He's like he's the lead guy. He's the quarterback. And to say that this is your friend is really extraordinary for for Hector, because it's almost like saying, "My own honor." Hector is almost saying, "My own honor is as important to me as the survival of the city and the survival of my family." So, I mean, if you were uh, engaged in combat and you knew that, by some kind of trick or subterfuge, you could defeat, this principal enemy and increase your chances of survival, you might well be inclined to do that, even if it's not necessarily above board. But these fights turn out to be to some extent more like almost like dances, certainly like contests, like Olympic contests, more than a desire for victory in the war. So they exchange gifts, and Hector gets Ajax's belt, and Ajax gets Hector's sword. And the important thing about this is that Hector's sword will be the instrument of Ajax's death later on. It's not in the Iliad, it's later in the tradition. But what happens is, at the death of Achilles, the Greek army has to decide who gets the award of Achilles' armor. And they have a debate. Um, they they say, well, of the Greeks that helped us the most in the 10-year long war, Odysseus and Ajax are preeminent among those who have survived all that time. And the two of these characters speak, and you can read about this in much later epics. And Ovid, the Roman poet, makes much of this. But the the point is that Odysseus says, "I was the most valuable player. I was the most valuable warrior because of my wits, because of my cunning, because of my ability to lie." Um, and of course, the Trojan horse was his idea. Ajax says, he's very direct. He doesn't have layers of meaning. He says, "I simply stood up, and I was the shield of the Achaeans. I used my brute physical strength. I didn't use my tongue. I didn't use my any kind of persuasion. I simply went out there every day and I fought the fight." And the army gives the award to Odysseus. And this sends Ajax into a fit of madness. And he, unfortunately, makes a fool of himself, because what he does is the gods prevent him from um, taking vengeance on the Greeks by turning him towards a sheepfold, where the Greek army is keeping their animals for feed. And Ajax kills all the sheep, and he looks ridiculous doing this. So he decides he has lost face and he has to commit suicide. And the way he commits suicide is he falls on the sword of Hector. So Hector, in fact, even though Hector's long dead, Hector is the instrument of Ajax's death. So it puts Ajax in that sort of realm outside of the human. His behavior is so monstrous. His desire to slaughter everyone is so monstrous, and yet at the same time becomes, in Greek eyes at least, so comical, because he vents his anger against animals. Um, so, of course, whether or not we're supposed to know that, it's this eternal question of, are we supposed to know the ultimate fate of Ajax when we're reading the Iliad? It's it, it's impossible to say. In book 8, we have even more of the gods, and this time the humans almost completely retract. Zeus begins by saying that he has total authority on Olympus, and he's got no patience for people who want to question him or change the outcome of the war. He can't change the outcome of the war in one sense, because Zeus can't override fate. He's bound by fate, and he's also bound by promises that he makes, if he makes them upon the river Styx. If he promises something, he says, "I swear by the Styx, the river in the underworld." He can't go back on that, and that sort of links up into fate. in some way, that the tradition never completely explains, but it's the sense that once that's uttered, once Zeus says that, he can't go back on it. So, Hera and Poseidon at one point, Hera is his wife, Poseidon is his brother, kind of scheme to see if maybe they feel each other out to see if maybe they can sort of distract Zeus in some way or change his plan. And Poseidon wants no part of it. He says Zeus is by far the stronger of all of us put together. Even though Poseidon is technically a sort of an equal part brother, Zeus controls Olympus, Poseidon controls the land and the sea, and Hades controls the underworld. So they're supposed to be co-equal in their authority, but somehow Zeus always manages to assert greater authority than his brothers. So here in Poseidon's scheme, but they get nowhere, and then we have some battle. Where Hector wounds the archer, Teucer, who's the brother of Ajax. But it's not an important part of this book. The gods are always coming back in and arguing. Hera and Athena, towards the end of the book, um, decide that they can try to appeal to Zeus on the basis of the fact that they both love the Greeks, and so many of the Greeks are dying. And they both physically want to partake in the battle as much as they can, like, the way Aphrodite and Ares did in Book 6. Athena and Hera, these two goddesses, are going to go out on the battlefield and actually fight alongside the Greeks. But Zeus says, "No, I'm not going to have any of this from either of you, as much as I respect you." And he says something really telling. It sounds almost like a mob boss. He says, if you want evidence of how strong I am, just go and look under the, in places like Tartarus, where you will see Cronus, who is his father, and Iapetus and the other tyrants, all basically enchained forever. Zeus is saying, well, I am the boss because I wrested power away from those who came before me, and they will be in prison forever. And that's all the evidence you need about my authority. Can't kill the gods, of course, um, but it's very suggestive of someone who absolutely has no patience for anyone um, challenging his authority or his wisdom. So in terms of leadership, it sort of brings back the notion of Agamemnon, but it's sort of exponentially more, um, how shall we say, unbridled. His unbridled authority, unbridled power, and we see Zeus in the poem in different ways. He'll, eventually, later on, he'll weep for his son Sarpedon. He and Hera share a tender moment when they talk about the fact that Sarpedon can't be saved because that would go against fate, and then all the gods and goddesses would want to jump in and save their favorites. So Zeus at that point says, "Well, if I can't do anything, at least I'll send a rain shower of bloody tears, and that'll tell people on Earth that it's giving me grief that this young warrior, that Sarpedon, has died." And we'll talk more about that in book 16 when it comes up. But for now, just the leadership issues. Zeus really doesn't figure into the equation so much because um, he doesn't have to negotiate as mortals do. But his suggestiveness about his power um, somewhat mimics Agamemnon. This illusion that he's if you want to really know how powerful he is, like, he can show you evidence, and you probably don't want to see it. It's probably too ugly and too much for you to actually see how it is that he goes about um, settling score with its enemies. It kind of brings back images of movie images like Scarface or what have you. So that is basically what I wanted to cover in books 7 and 8, and we will meet again on recording soon enough. Hope all is well. Talk soon.